I had a topic come up that was asked about comics that appealed to me a lot as a kid, or at different stages in my life, and I basically grew out of them, or conversely grew into comics. The second part's a little harder to nail down, but I think it's a fascinating topic, and I'm sure it applies to everyone. So let me give you some of mine, and let's talk about it. Hey everybody, this is Perch. I think that it's natural. It starts. This sounds like the start of like a sex ed course. Okay, let me reverse course. It's normal that over the course of a comic reading history of your course of your fandom, that you're going to like and dislike certain comics, and then as you get older, those tastes will change. That's normal. It's to be expected. It's because we read comics with a bit of a filter, the filter being our own experience and the outside factors that are coming in at us at any given moment. Perfect example of a comic that it didn't make sense. I didn't care for it when I was younger, but then as I got older, I did. Is Watchmen. And when I first read Watchmen, it was the '80s, and I didn't. It was a book, and I could tell what they were doing. I was old enough to understand kind of there was the political undertones and kind of the complex world, and there was a main story and a lot of kind of world building in there, and it all it all made sense. What was happening? Oh, here comes a siren. We'll see what they're up to. You'll hear it in the background. This is one of the amazing benefits, by the way, of my channel. Is I drive around and you get to hear ambulances go running by. Clearly, it's a coronavirus case that they're going to. Anyway, um, Watchmen was a comic that it was entertaining. I remember going through the bits and the fighting, and I thought the end twist was really clever when I was younger. But all the nuance of kind of the politics, the parallels of Vietnam, kind of all the different ways of violence begets violence, and so on. That was, I won't say lost on me. I just didn't care. And when I got older and for certainly got more involved with the world around me and started to travel more and kind of got a better sense, it's kind of in the same way that there's a clear curve that when people are younger, they tend to be more liberal or more socialist. And as they age, i.e., they start obtaining their own wealth, then magically they turn into conservatives. um, not completely, of course. So, there's differences, but there's an interesting curve there where you tend to get more conservative as you get older. And I think it's not, people will say, oh, older means, lamer, kind of out of pop culture. It's not that. It's that your experiences change what you're looking at. So Watchmen was a comic that I grew to appreciate a lot more as I got older. Same thing with the Dark Knight, the original Dark Knight, 4 issue series that Frank Miller did, not the Dark Knight Returns. That got a lot better for me as I got older. When I was younger and I was reading comics, what was more entertaining for me was just I wanted to get some good action moments. Things like, and I was of course older by the time this hit. Things like the Ultimates would have been far more appealing to me as a kid. Just the way it was paced. And I think a lot of Mark Mark Miller's stuff tends to be a lot more kid based, or but I mean, I think it appeals to more of that sensibility, more of kind of teens. You're into comics, and there's some super violence, and the twists are clever, but they're not multifaceted, and so I think it appeals. The other direction, a comic that I liked more as a kid. I mean, I remember I liked Spider Man a lot more as a kid. I think I liked Batman in general more as a kid, and I should say younger in life. When I was in my 20s, I liked Spider Man. I liked Batman. What's interesting one is the X Men, because there's different eras of the X Men that definitely appealed to me at different times. I mean, and some that appeal to both. The John Byrne, Chris Claremont era of X Men, and even before that, the Dave Cochran version of X Men. That whole run from, let's say, 100 to 200, roughly. It goes back a little further now, but anyway, that whole rough run of Uncanny X Men was one that I could pick up today and really enjoy. And back when I was in my teens, I loved that comic. It was great storytelling, and I like the villains, I like the pacing, and I like the all parts about it. It's a perfect blend of kind of story and action, and it's always stuck with me. I've been on Thinking Critical's channel, and they talked to Doc, who is the big kind of X Men guy. He knows a lot about comics. I think it's a bit unfair to him to call him the X Men guy, but he of course loves the X Men, and I would love to have a good long conversation with him about X Men because I also have that very deep background of X Men, and just it was the comic that I first really fell in love with. But there are different eras in X Men that I think I liked a lot better as a teen. They haven't aged as well with me, and conversely, I mean, the Grant Morrison run is an interesting one because it took a few readings of that, and to really appreciate what was going on there about everything he was trying to do with the X Men and everything else. And I'm curious how Hickman's run is going to hold up. I think for a lot of people, this is just my general prediction. A lot of people who loved the House of X, Powers of X, and everything Hickman did to kind of reboot, re-energize X-Men, I think will age, not age poorly, but I don't think it's going to be as beloved as people think. A lot of people, I think, loved that what he did when he first stepped into it because the X Men were in such dire straits because it was so poor that it was, it was like, a dying man of thirst, stumbling across that proverbial, pool in the desert. And as years go by, if the comics get better, even if they don't, I think we'll look back on that and go, there's some good things there, but also the challenge he's going to have is, will it all amount to much ado about nothing? It was a very engaging storyline that set up a lot of things for the future, but if those things don't pan out, then that's not good. Anyway, um, I was never a huge Superman fan. I've loved certain Superman stories, but that was never kind of my thing. Other comics, I remember when I was, pardon me, much younger. GI Joe was a comic. The old Larry Hama stuff was great, and I really enjoyed that run. And even the kind of the earlier Transformers work, I thought it was really kind of clever what they were doing and some good stuff. And I remember, really jumping at the bit to read those comics and being very excited to read them. And then I've got since in time I've gone back and I've looked at them and I'm like, well, these comics were extremely shallow, and of course they were. They're based on a merchandise toy, but as a kid, I'm like, wow, this is some adult storytelling here. These guys got guns and there's a terrorist organization and whew, they're doing some stuff. But as time has gone by, it really hasn't panned out that way. I mean, I think tastes change, and so I think the most important actually aspect of this topic and comics in general is that you shouldn't go really hard at either fangirling, fanboying over a comic or just trashing it, because you might be eating your words in 5 to 10 years. If you have a comic that seems terrible to you now, you may discover a few more years of experience, a few more different things going on in your life, that suddenly it has changed and shifted and plays well. I'd be curious. I don't talk to enough people. I have the sample group of my daughters, but I would like to talk to more kids, particularly in the kind of 10 to 18 range, and put comics in front of them. That's probably the group I hear the least of. I mean, it's first of all, if you run a shop and you've got like a 14-year-old coming in, you can't exactly go, hey, sit down here and let me really go into a lot of comics with you and kind of understand some things. I mean, the parents are going to think that's weird, and and it is. But I want to hear from them because there's a lot of comics being produced right now that claim to be trying to really hook and attract that audience as long-term readers. And I know they're not landing with older readers. So, like me with Transformers and G.I. Joe, are they landing with the younger readers? Would they even have a hope to land with the younger readers? Because here's how the argument often goes: it says, well, this comic is not made for those long-term comic fans. The Uncancelable Wasp, that comic is made for a younger audience. It's like, yeah, okay, but the younger audience isn't showing up to buy it, as you can tell in the sales numbers and everything else. Nobody is buying Uncancelable Wasp. It's about to be Cancelable Wasp. So, if you're trying to hit this market, you're missing it. And then the argument shifts to, well, kids today, they are, they've got mobile phones and Game Boys and all the technologies. They're not attracted to these comics. And so I'm like, well, but then why are you making them? Like, what are you trying? It's like, oh, you don't understand. We're creating IP that's going to be, later put into those markets. It's like, that's a weird way to do it. So let me get this straight. You're going to come up with a comic. It's going to appeal to none of the buyers, but it is going to appeal to an audience that isn't reading or paying attention to it. You're going to build up a few issues and some storylines in this run, and then you're going to convert it to digital, and then magically everybody's going to show up and they're going to read the comic. Is that's the master plan that you're into? That's a weird plan. Um, I I know it's more detailed than that, but that is kind of how the argument that I've had goes. So I'm very curious because I think some of the comics getting produced today, and I'll give you a perfect example, is Moon Girl. Moon Girl, when put in front of the age group that it's arguably aimed at, the kind of the 8 to 12 group, likes the comic. I've put that comic in front of a 9 year old, my daughter. I put it in front of I've taken that comic to some schools, and it's enjoyed. It's liked. The kids pick it up. They think it's cool. Girl has a dinosaur. She's super clever and inventing things. It works, and they're happy, and life's good. So success. That's going to call that title a success. Squirrel Girl does not seem to have the same. People, the kids are like, oh look, it's a girl with a squirrel tail, and she's got a squirrel pet, and that's kind of cute. But then they're like, she's in with Loki, and there's all these like little sub in jokes and stuff that seem aimed at the comic fans that we don't want and everything. So I'm curious. I do think the comic industry is healthy if it's producing comics for a younger age, or an age that is not the traditional comic fans, but it needs to then be bought by those fans. It needs to actually land target. And so I'm curious to see if this market that apparently doesn't read comics and just plays the Game Boys and the mobile phones and all the streamings, if they would even like these comics if you gave it to them. I'd like to know. Anyway, those are some of the comics I have. What are some on your mind? What are comics that you loved? Absolutely, they're great comics for you, and then they kind of you fell out of favor. They stopped being great. What are comics like that for you, or the other way around? Did you just like a comic when you were younger, and then it got better as you got older? Would love to hear about it in the comments below about the comics. Otherwise, like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Comic Perch, and hey, thanks for listening, and thank you for this topic. It was a great topic.